سيرناتا رينولدز هي مديرة برنامج عديمي الجنسية المنظمة الدولية للاجئين ومنسقة دولية للاجئين في الأمم المتحدة وحكومة الولايات المتحدة، أستاذة مساعدة في مركز القانون بجامعة جورج تاون، وهي تدرس مساق حول انعدام الجنسية. عملت كمديرة قسم الدفاع والسياسات عن الحقوق واللاجئين والمهاجرين في منظمة العفو الدولية والولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، ونشرت عدد من المقالات حول حقوق الإنسان وتقاطعاتها مع قوانين الدستورية والهجرة في الولايات المتحدة. سيرناتا حتتحدث حوالي 15 دقيقة، ثم ننتقل بعد ذلك لمتحدثنا الثاني الذي سوف أقدمه لكم بعد انتهاء المتحدثة الأولى. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. First, I wanted to just say thank you all for giving me the opportunity to be here and to be a part of this conference, which I know is historical and is also incredibly powerful. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to use to just briefly go over some of the other statelessness, some other stateless populations in the world, but also to discuss some of the ways that stateless people have been able to find remedies to their situations. Never perfect, always ongoing, but remedies nonetheless. I don't have a... Oh, you're doing it. Okay, well, we're going to start then with a quote from Hannah Arendt. She was a stateless person, someone made stateless during World War II. She was also a philosopher and a writer, and she wrote eloquently about what it means to be stateless. And so this quote, just really quickly, basically says that because stateless people don't exist inside the law, they have to find a way to exist, and the only place that a country will put them is to make them a criminal. But even then, at least they're inside the system. They're not outside the system. So a great sad irony. So I wanted to do a few minutes on, just really briefly, on Refugees International's statelessness program. And this is only to point out all the different stateless populations that are around. So Amnesty, it's where I used to work. Refugees International has done 30 reports on statelessness, and 5 of them have been on the stateless in Kuwait. That's about 20% of our reports. I'm hoping to get another one out of my time here, so that'll make it 6. But we've also done reports, as you can see, on populations all over the world. In Myanmar, in South Sudan, where there's a risk of statelessness, in Bangladesh, in Kenya, in Latvia, in a lot of other countries that have just listed there, Eritrea, Ethiopia. And keep going. And this is a picture of South Sudan. This is a picture of the Directorate for Nationality in that country. As I'm sure you all know, South Sudan is a brand new country. And so this was the first office that was opened in order to give people their citizenship documents. And I was able to go and see it in April of last year. And I started here because it's a really good example of, this is a time, state succession is a time when statelessness is very likely to happen. And so it's a time of great risk for people. But in South Sudan, they've created a nationality law that is incredibly broad and should really eradicate statelessness or make sure it doesn't start. But unfortunately, like in so many other countries around the world, discrimination is at the root cause of statelessness, not as some sort of a glitch in the law. And so it's critical time there, and they're both at a place where statelessness may not happen, and statelessness could happen en masse. So here's a global view of, just real quick again, a global view of what statelessness looks like. There are about 15 million stateless people in the world. Obviously that number is not hard because stateless people are not documented. And so it's not that you can count how many there are. But this number is based on studies done by UNHCR, and so we use it, the UN Refugee Agency. There are, just so quickly, there are about 30,000 Syrian Kurds, many of whom are now in Iraq. There are about 100,000 or more stateless people in Zimbabwe. It's hard to know because it's not a group. It's not a group that's been made stateless. It's sort of done in an individual way, but massive numbers. Nepal, Bhutan, there were about 300,000 people who were stateless. They have a remedy, and so while there are still many stateless people, it's a situation that we'll look at quickly because it's actually had a positive remedy. There are, well, in Kenya, there are about 100,000 people. Kuwait, as you know, has about 100,000 people who are stateless, maybe more. Myanmar, the country of Myanmar, has about 1 million people who are stateless. Many of them now are around the region because they have been terribly persecuted, even more so in the last year. Although that's another situation where the government is in transition. It's a new government, of course, and it's a government that's looking at democratization, or trying to. And so the government has been publicly stated that it will deal with the stateless population inside of the country. It's a really important time there, and it's really important to figure out what's going to happen. And so we're spending quite a lot of time in Myanmar and Bangladesh. And then it was just a few other ones. Ethnic Russians, after the fall of the former Soviet Union, have found themselves trapped in many situations where they're not considered citizens of anywhere. And that's true of the Ukraine and a few other countries. We'll leave it there. Anyway, there's a global view for you. This is, I wanted to talk a little bit about opportunities for reform, and there couldn't be a better one. This is for the Rohingya in Burma. What you're looking at is their town, their neighborhoods in the capital of the state they live in, called Rakhine, or Arakan State. This is a picture of where their houses were. And in June, they were all burned to the ground. So they're starting from zero. And hopefully this government is willing to take steps to find a remedy for them. Now I just want to do a little bit of, this is actually again a Rohingya family, to talk a little bit about human rights. We often hear about the, obviously that there's rights for the stateless under the Statelessness Conventions of 1954 and 1961, which we've heard a little bit about already. But of course, stateless people have every other human right as everyone else. And so they have the right to education, they have the right to justice before the law, the right to equality, they have the right to health care, and all kinds of other rights. So this is a little boy who's clearly doesn't have his rights protected. This is in a displacement camp in Myanmar, a stateless child, and it's because the government has permitted almost no access to this, about 100,000 people who are stateless and displaced. And so, as you can see, a lot of malnourishment is taking place. This is another photo of the same population. They have no housing, no schools, no education, no health care, and it's taking a terrible toll on them. Sorry. So these are rights that everyone has, which I'm sure you all know, but oftentimes people forget that stateless people have rights, that just because you're stateless doesn't mean you don't have human rights. So I just wanted to list really quickly some of the rights that everyone has, regardless of whether someone's a citizen or not of a country, and also the obligations that every state has to ensure that everyone inside that state has human rights and that those human rights are protected. Because even if a nation says, this population is this is a foreign population here, it doesn't matter. They still have the obligation to protect them. Yeah, sorry. And then here are some, I can provide these slides as well to people so that we can go through quickly. But here are some more slides. And actually, just to note, the acronyms afterwards, the ICC and the ICE and all those different acronyms, those are the conventions that protect those rights of people. Okay, sorry. And this, I just want to talk a little bit about the importance of national IDs. There's no one in the room that doesn't know that this is important. And of course, this is an ID that shows someone was in Kuwait well before independence. And this is an oil worker's documentation. This is, again, the Nationality Directorate in South Sudan, where you can see it's just a massive amount of people. And they're there because they want their ID. They're proud of being South Sudanese. They fought hard for it. But also they get it. They get that they need their ID, or else they could become stateless. And so people are lining up for 2 or 3 or 4 days to get their documentation. I just wanted to give this quote because the kinds of propaganda that's used against stateless people in one country is the same in every country. And so this is just an example of propaganda that's used and oftentimes not questioned, even though it's clearly not true. So just also want to talk a little bit about discriminated populations. and I'll do this briefly, but again, I wanted to give you a sense of where stateless are and also who's likely or possibly going to become stateless. This is Tawerga town. It's in Libya. It was a town that was full of Libyans of sub-Saharan descent. And they had, many rebels thought that they were aligned with Gaddafi's government. And so as soon as the Gaddafi government fell, they were attacked. And so this was a town that was attacked and emptied completely of the Libyans of sub-Saharan descent. And the nationality law in Libya is not complete. It hasn't been published yet. But it's clear that both this population and a population of people, an ethnic group called the Tuareg, will also probably become stateless. They're probably just going to get written out of the nationality law. This is another example of discrimination. The barrier you see there that's actually the only neighborhood left in Sittwe, the capital of the country, or the capital of the state. And this is, there's about 7,000 people here who are Rohingya, again, the stateless of Myanmar. And this is supposed to be a barrier that keeps them inside their neighborhood. And obviously it's not that firm. And so I asked, does this keep you inside? As it turned out, it's more of a psychological barrier because people are so afraid that they'll be beaten up or arrested, which is quite likely. They just stay inside. They stay inside this neighborhood where no one has access to them. And they can't move. Then this is another Rohingya man who's in Bangladesh. He's 85 years old. He's another person who did have a nationality before independence. And now he does not have a nationality. And he just wants his grandkids to have a nationality at this point. He's sort of given up on his own opportunities and then decided he just wants it for his grandkids. All right, and this is actually an example. This is actually Iraq, and it's Kurdistan, the north of Iraq, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of Syrian Kurds that have gone to Kurdistan because it's the most likely place, of course, for them to get protection. But also, we had people that just went there, that were just there, staff who were just there about a month ago, and I had asked them to ask about their experiences and where did they want to become citizens of, if anywhere. And they definitely did not want to go back and become citizens of Syria. So hopefully Kurdistan will be accepting of them and make them citizens of Iraq and Kurdistan, of course. This is another. Actually, we'll skip this one. Can skip it. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Actually, the one before was because national security, as you all know, is often used as an excuse for denying someone their citizenship. And those young men they lived in Bangladesh, and they were, the government was trying to kick them out as well as a lot of other young men because they were supposed to be a national security threat. But they tried to go back to Myanmar and had been kicked out of there as well as a national security threat, which in neither case had they presented any action that would suggest they're a national security threat. So they went back to Myanmar for 3 days and then went back again to Bangladesh because it was no better in either. Okay, now we're just going to spend a few minutes on where there has been a resolution of statelessness. It's, like I said, not 100% and not all good, but it's important to take a look at that too. So here's a few places where there have been positive outcomes. The Bahari, the Sri Lankan Sil Tamils, the Bhutanese, which are called La Champa, in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Mauritania, are of Senegalese descent, and in the Sudans, we're hoping that we're going to see a positive outcome. And I took pictures of protests, and I didn't take pictures. I brought pictures of protests in many cases, just so there's a bigger sense of the movement, the movement of stateless people for their right to nationality. So this is the Bahari. I'm not going to go through actually all the details. Again, I'll give you the slides. I know we don't have too much time, but basically the resolution was that Bangladesh actually said, after lots of protests and after lots of people saying this is a corrupt government for many years, there was a caretaker government. And that created a space of neutrality, or a sort of a post-partisan space. And inside of that, there was a space to actually try to deal with the situation of statelessness. And the Bahari did all kinds of different activities, not unlike here, including litigation. And I can put the next one. And in 2008, the High Court of Bangladesh said that the Bahari were not stateless, that they were citizens of the country, and that it should be recognized. And you'll see there that in the decision they said this nation has not gained anything, and rather was deprived of the contribution they could have made in nation building. So it was a very strong decision, of course. And that's that. And so here's Sri Lanka's Sil Tamils, who are also, as you can see, protesting here for their rights. And maybe we just go a little bit. This is a population that was singled out of the country and basically rendered stateless. They also fought for their rights and were supported by the Tamils. There were other Tamils in Sri Lanka, and there were Tamils in India, so they were supported on both sides, but also by other people as well, of course, and ultimately able to achieve nationality. Just trying to think, is there anything? Yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Like I said, we can share the slides. Actually, I guess I should just say there's laws. So the 1988 law specifically said stateless people, which is, I know, a struggle for many governments, and it was the right thing to do. In the 2003, there was another law, grant of citizenship. And then there was finally another law in 2008, and that actually provided citizenship for the 200 ethnic Chinese that were in the country. Ethnic Chinese are actually there's a lot of ethnic Chinese all over Southeast Asia who are stateless. Okay. That photo didn't turn out too well. Okay, it's the Las Champas, yeah. So again, this is another population who are able to achieve some steps towards their nationality, or towards their right to nationality. And I think we'll just keep going. Again, we'll just... so I'll just point out one or two things. So in 1998, there was a first census, the first national census. And as you know here, that's a critical point in the country, and it's a critical point for the identification of citizens. And so, not unlike here, the Las Champas were basically not included in the census. They were included as they called them illegal migrants. And from that point forward, they were in a lot of trouble because they weren't citizens anymore. Then there's a whole series of events that took place. We're on to Ethiopia. Okay, we're on to Ethiopia. Oh, that's okay. So anyway, we'll look at the slides. There was a remedy there. And then Ethiopia, Eritrea, just to say that that was a state succession, where Eritrea moved out of Ethiopia. There had been very goodwill between the two, and then there was an outbreak of war. And during that time, not unusually, the people of Eritrean origins were kicked out, and they were also denationalized. And then ultimately, there was a decision in 2004 to permit those who had been kicked out to return, and also to permit nationality. Okay. I think, how are we doing for time? Yeah, I think we'll stop there in that case. I wanted to stop, of course, at the end with another protest that was taking place, which, of course, is taking place here. And I think a lot of the examples I've given, although we didn't go through them in too much detail, a lot of those examples were of situations that were incredibly difficult, where the politics were all bad, where most of the people weren't interested, most of the people outside of the stateless weren't interested, and yet they were able to achieve a remedy for their situation, which is not over. They are fighting every single day, and they have to continue fighting. I also want to let you know that when I travel, of course, to work with stateless people and to document the situations they're in, I have been asked so many times about the stateless in Kuwait and about what the stateless in Kuwait are doing, because they see it in Twitter, or they see it on Facebook, or they see it in blogs. And so you are an incredible inspiration to other stateless people around the world, and I think that's really important, and you should clap yourself, or applause, give yourself applause for that. But I know this is just the beginning of a movement. And I know this isn't I should say this isn't the beginning of a movement, and I don't know where you are in the movement, where we are in the movement, but I know the fight is still on. And again, I'm just so proud and happy to be here. I really appreciate it for being here, and I'm happy to talk about other situations and countries at another time. Thank you.